And I don't know what the divisions are. They kind of change all the time. So like I'm saying, like it's a 50-50 electorate. And that's why getting an RFK can make the difference. Because he might have like 2% of the vote, 3% of the vote, but that's enough, right? So that's my coalition building. You got to do that. And that coalition building requires you to be flexible on your policy ideas.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey there. Welcome to The New Rules with Alan Pentz, where we help you navigate today's chaos with precision. Your host, Alan Pentz, has 25 years of experience working in business and government, and he knows how the old rules have fallen apart. Each episode, we'll explore how to thrive in this new landscape by mastering the new rules while everyone else is still figuring them out. Let's dive in.
We are back. What are we talking about today?
I think we're going to talk about the tech bros and influencers, or the tech bras, as my team would say.
The tech bras are coming. So yeah, I hesitated to write this one. Well, because it kind of feels like torn out of the headlines. I don't usually like to do quick takes on political things or day to day. I like to kind of look at the longer term trends. But I thought there was enough here that I think is going to shape things going forward that I thought it was worth it. So, but it was inspired by last week. So it'll be a couple weeks before people hear this, but last week's sinking of the continuing resolution.
Right.
And Elon getting, I think it was Elon first who started tweeting about all the pork in the bill and how terrible it was. It was 1,500 pages and came out the day before they were supposed to pass it. And Trump got into the act and they killed the CR. So that kind of inspired it. And I was really thinking through what's going on here. And, you know, it struck me that one of the truisms of government and politics is that whatever media is important in the day, that becomes the media through which politics is shaped, right? So at one point it was newspapers, and then, you know, famously Kennedy beat Nixon TV but people who didn't see it but listened to the debate thought that Nixon won, but people who saw the debate on TV thought Kennedy won.
Kennedy was so handsome and Nixon was sweating like a pig.
Yeah, he was all sweaty. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like me. That would have been me. And then, you know, like really Trump, sorry to say, like Obama kind of got social media in his time, you know, in 2008. So they were using Facebook and stuff like that to target people.
Yeah, he was ahead of his
time. So unfortunately, his people did not keep up with the times. David Plouffe and the others didn't seem to really get what was going on this time. But but then Trump really took that mantle in 2016, where he was, well, I guess it was a little bit old technology, old media with cable news. But, you know, he really used Twitter as well at that point. So he was sort of the guy that kind of got the new media then. And I think this election showed, there was a pretty concerted effort. I can't remember who they attributed it to go after young men of all different race and economic demographics.
And they attributed it to, you mean?
Yeah, it was like Don Jr. working with someone else kind of thought this out. Someone like that. I can't remember.
I think it was Don Jr. Yeah.
Yeah, it might have been. So they deliberately went after these podcasts and YouTubers. And, you know, Kamala did that to some extent on her side, but she just wasn't out there mixing it up the way that Trump did. I mean, Trump, at some point, somebody made a joke that like Trump did a podcast with a squirrel yesterday because it was just like he'd go on anything, you know, to go talk to it. He'd sit there for 3 hours talking, right? And
by the end of it, the squirrel was crying.
That's right. So I think, you know, he really mastered this medium and the different media that are important today. And so that's the one, you know, like one thing, politics is now shaped by that. And then on the other hand, I do think the government itself has to adapt to whatever, whereas politics adapts to the media of the day, I think the government itself has to adapt to the industry that's hot of the day. So, you know, I kind of say that the big corporation that emerged after World War II, the GMs and GEs and that kind of thing, that kind of shaped the federal bureaucracy post-World War II. So and we're kind of living with the post echo of that now. And what's the effort by Trump is to come in and bring tech into the government, this alliance he made with the tech bros. And so that was, there are a lot of them, like the All In podcast guys and Elon, obviously, and Peter Thiel to some extent, Joe Lonsdale. Like a lot of these people kind of came on board during the campaign, and now they're coming into government. And Elon, of course, Vivek have this Doge thing coming. And so to me, this is inevitable that the major industry of the day is going to shape the government, because when people look to examples of what to do, like we're a mimetic species, right? We imitate others. And so we look, what's the most successful company? Well, they're going to say like Google, Meta, Apple, Amazon. And so we're going to design our government around whatever the most dynamic sector is, and that's tech, right? So I do think if the Doge thing, it might not even be the Doge thing. It's really like getting people like David Sachs in the White House, other venture capitalists, people who have run companies, getting them in to help shape how the government does business, to bring it up to date to the kind of, it's never going to be tech standard, but it'll get better, right? So I think that's going to have to happen. And I think the Democrats are going to have to do the same thing. So I think they made a big mistake in post-Trump election in 2016 in demonizing big tech.
Right.
They really went after them. And to some extent, you can demonize big tech, but not like little tech. But they really demonized everything. And I think that was a huge mistake, because they kind of taken a little bit of the lead in 2008 when Obama came in to bring in tech. So there were some real tech people in the government. They came in and fixed healthcare.gov when it got screwed up.
God, that
total mess, right? But they really didn't fully embrace tech community. And I don't think maybe tech was quite as dominant in the economy at that point. It was kind of trending that way, but it wasn't quite there yet. And so I think now they're really going to have to, what they've been doing, like if you looked at the election, there are plenty of tech bros who are Democrats, but they're not really it doesn't strike me they're really shaping the policy of the party. They're really just a donor base for, Democrats. So I think they have to embrace the tech bros like Trump embraced Musk and the all-in guys. And I think that is crucial going forward. And, they've got plenty of people.
Do you think they'll learn from that, from what's happened in this last election?
I think that they might not learn. I think that the tech bros might force them, right? So I think that it would be really smart of the Mark Cubans and the Mark Benioffs and the Reid Hoffmans and all those guys, right, to kind of work together to fund a disruptor candidate in the Democratic Party. That might be what it takes. I don't know if they're willing to do that, but I think they probably should, right? Because certainly the way the party's going, running Kamala Harris is not working. So I think, and there's no real leader of the party anymore. So it's open. So I think they should look for a good disruptor candidate, and whether that could be a Josh Shapiro or somebody, but someone who will really embrace the tech community and bring them in and help shape the government through it. I mean, I think that's crucial in the next election. So we'll see. I mean, we're 4 years out. We don't really know what's going on. But what I thought was so interesting is that if you looked at, I saw this stat the other day from Scott Galloway's blog. He's a big writer on tech, and he's a kind of marketing expert. And he said that, I don't know, what is it, GM or Volkswagen, like every car they sell, there's like $50, I'm making up the stats here, but it's like $50 in advertising. And in a Tesla, there's $4.
Yeah, it's $4. That's right. You had that in the article.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, why is why is Tesla doing so well?
So obviously Elon is advertising himself, right? So he's out there and he's the influencer, right? So he can create all this attention. He's sort of like Trump, a business version of Trump. And and that's sort of what you're seeing in the advertising market is brands are kind of losing cachet and people are gaining it. So that's the influencer coming to fore, right? And so I think in the future, these groups, what Trump sort of understood is that the old Washington groups, like Matt Iglesias, the blogger, called all these sort of, I guess they're sort of like racial, gender, other kind of grievance groups in DC that are largely associated with Democrats, right?
Progressive coalition, right? He was saying that that's much what they're
all these nonprofits that profess to represent Hispanics and Blacks and
The
trans
environmentalists.
community, and that's right. And they're not elected. Like no one elected them.
Right.
So do they really represent them? And they don't really deliver votes. They're just a mouthpiece. They're like an elite. They kind of live off of elite money. So they get money from rich people who want to pretend like they're helping these communities. But like the reality is they have very tenuous ability to turn out any votes. And like I said in the piece, I don't think they could get somebody elected dog catcher in an off-year election. Like these guys, they don't have any real power. And the Biden administration, like, genuflected to these people, like, on all the different, border policies and inflation and all this stuff. And it's like, who are these groups, right? They don't represent anyone. And what Trump realized is that the real groups are the influencers, and they're up for grabs. So Joe Rogan has more listeners than people that watch the news or read the Times or what, So you go get a group of these, basically coalition building isn't going to the groups, or it isn't. I remember when I was when I was on the Hill, like we were all talking about soccer moms, right? We're going to go target some policies and some advertising, soccer moms. Well, you don't do that anymore. Now the soccer mom follows somebody on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah, so you target what the soccer mom is following.
Right. So that's what Trump did. And he was able, now coalition building is like going and getting RFK, right?
Right.
And going and getting Joe Rogan to be part of your Theo Vaughn. You go on these podcasts and kind of develop, you can hijack part of their audience, right, to your campaign, or bring the influencer in straight out as what Trump did. And I think this is a trend going forward in the Democrats. I mean, to some extent, they did go, she went on Call Me Daddy, or whatever that thing is. I don't know.
Sounds interesting.
I don't really know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a progressive woman, right?
Call me Daddy.
But the problem with that was she only went on the one she already had, right? So, and then they were kind of doing, Kamala was kind of doing a version of this, but she brought in like Liz Cheney. It's like, who wants Liz Cheney? Like, if that's your influencer that you're bringing across the aisle, like, good luck. You're not going to win many elections. So, and I think these people are up for grabs. Like, I don't think they permanently move to Trump. And I cite, Joe Rogan waited to endorse until the last minute because he's trying to get Harris on the podcast, right? I think that was a really foolish move.
Yeah, let's throw in that.
Yeah, well, I just think they had this thing where she can't mix it up, right? And I'm sorry, you cannot have a candidate. Another thing I think I didn't put in the piece, but I've said before, is I think this whole era of like, I made a gaffe and that's going to change the whole election is gone. Like, I think Trump just went on 1,000 podcasts and talked all the time.
He thrives on his gaffes.
Right.
I mean,
so it's like gaffe after gaffe after gaffe. So there's no, people just don't, people don't care about that. So I think you got to stop this. Like, I'm going to have one message and only deliver that message and try to never have a gaffe. Just get rid of that. Just go mix it up. Just run into the crowd and start doing it. And just when you get a gaffe, just like blow it off and move on to the next thing.
Move on.
Whatever.
It just strikes me, going back a little bit, how the groups, nobody elected the groups, right? The group.
Right.
Nobody elected Elon Musk either, right? So there's such a disconnect on what the Democrats have been doing and what they may see as being more effective going forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no one elected Elon, but 300 million people follow him, right? So
of course.
He's created his own constituency that you're trying to hijack. And that's what the Democrats didn't understand, is that their groups don't control anything.
Yeah.
They don't have any attention. They don't move any votes, or very few. And Trump went and got the people actually doing that every day, on social media.
It's like, why don't they do that?
I would say that they still live in the old system. They think that's going to work. I mean, and to some extent, it was this David Plouffe's fault for not understanding what was going on. He was one of Obama's campaign managers that Harris brought in August. But it might have also been like they just thought she was a terrible candidate, which she was. So they couldn't do this, right? She didn't get elected, right? She got appointed by Biden.
Yes.
And every time you try to run the appointed candidate, like Clinton in 16 or Harris in 24, you lose, right? Because it's hard to be president. And you have to go through that gauntlet of selection to show that you're good, right? I mean, if the Republicans were going to run the appointed candidate, Jeb Bush would have won the election in 2016, right? So it's that crucible of the primaries that shows you who is a candidate who gets it, who can put coalitions together and really do it. Right. And so Harris just couldn't hack it. So in some ways, you might not blame David Plouffe. Maybe he does understand this, but he just had a candidate that couldn't go on Joe Rogan because she would look like an idiot. Right. So who knows? But certainly next time, they better make sure they got a candidate who can mix it up and go on to Joe Rogan for 3 hours and go into enemy territory, go into friendly, everything. You got to do it all.
Yeah.
And forget about these damn groups. Like, don't even take meetings with them. Like, who cares what they think? And it's such an illusion, such a Potemkin village they constructed around this stuff. So hopefully the Democrats will listen to that. The Republicans certainly got it. So if they keep going on the way they're going, they're going to be a dominant majority party. So I think the Democrats will figure it out. I mean, I'm in favor of shifting back and forth more. I think I think we need two strong parties to get the worst influences of the other party and keep that in check. So I'm not either a Democrat or a Republican. I kind of shift back and forth depending on what I see. I'm just contrary to whatever's going on now.
It's contrarian.
Yeah. As soon as Trump, when Biden was in, I was all for like the Republican stuff. Now the Republicans in, I'm all like, what is going on? They're doing this wrong. They're doing that. So I'll be back and forth. So that's just my deal. So I thought that was really fascinating. And I kind of like talked about gathering these influencers. It's sort of like in college football now, or all NCAA sports, they have this transfer portal where every year
transfer portal, Alan.
Yeah. So every year they have this portal they set up that allows athletes to put themselves in so that they can transfer universities. So you put yourself in and then another university can grab you. And it's totally reshaped college sports. And so, like famously 2 years ago, Deion Sanders, whose nickname is Coach Prime, he was coaching at So he has like 12 nicknames, but one of them was Prime Time. So now he's Coach Prime. And his son is a quarterback who's actually doing the draft this year. And he was coaching somewhere like Jackson State, some no-name college in Mississippi, I think. And the Colorado Buffaloes, University of Colorado, they've done nothing for years. And so they got Deion Sanders to be coach. And then he went, he's got a big personality. He's crazy. He's got a big following. So he started like, hey, my son and I, we're going here. We're going to do this. He got all these players to come in through the transfer portal. So he was like a football program in a box. You just hire him and then he can bring everybody, right?
Okay.
So he got all these people to come through the transfer portal, and like the Buffs took a big run last year. It ended up petering out. But they've been decent for a couple of years now, right? Because they went from like the basement to like, okay, right? So basically that's what politics is now. It's a big transfer portal. So you got to go in there and be the Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, and mix it up and bring the RFKs in. Like I said, like, what if Kamala had given him like a sunshine and better eating task force or something like that? Like keep him out of the vaccine stuff, right? But he might have taken that. And the guy was running for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020.
People forget that. I mean, it wasn't that long ago.
Right. And then they brought in Tulsi Gabbard, right? And she was a former Democratic congresswoman. So it's clearly these people aren't like stuck on one side or the other. And if you're willing to build these coalitions, sometimes you're going to have to deal with some crazy stuff, right? I think that's the future. There are a bunch of crazy people in the country. So maybe you just try to put them in a little bit less dangerous place than Trump did, or is trying to. I don't know if I would have made him HHS secretary, but I'd give him a big important task force. So, I think that's what candidates have to do in the future.
As I say, what would be a good czar position?
For RFK?
Yeah.
Oh, give him some, tell him he's going to do, how we change the food supply or something like that. He's good on that. He believes in, eating better food and having it be higher quality and more organic. I don't know exactly what he thinks, but, that's harmless. Just to keep him away from, goddamn vaccines.
The czar up here.
I don't want polio, so I will.
Polio's bad. Polio's bad.
Yes, I think polio is bad, yes.
Yeah, away from that, though.
I don't know. Trump apparently said the other day that they're not. He's like, you'll get your polio vaccine. Don't worry. So I don't know, whatever. He's got, but like for Trump, it's just like he collects all these people, lets them kind of run around. And then when they get too out of hand, he kind of like throws them to the dogs, right? So I think that's his style, right? I think, maybe there was a way that if Harris had embraced, RFK, he brought some voters, right? I mean, the election turned on 1.36% of the popular vote and 230,000 votes in 3 swing states.
Yeah,
that's what the election was.
I like that you included that in the piece because, I mean, I don't think I realized that it was by that few because it's not the sense that you get unless you're actually looking at the numbers. Like, surprise, look at the data. You might learn something, but.
Yeah, and I think the trifecta aspect of like taking the House and the Senate and the presidency kind of, and on election day, a lot of the numbers were higher. Like it looked like the gap and he won by more. But since they counted all the mail-in and provisional ballots and stuff, it's close. So it was a very close election.
Yeah.
And they were lucky to take those congressional seats. I mean, let's be honest. They've got, like, right now with the appointments that Trump did out of the House, they have a 1-seat majority in the House coming in. I think it'll go up to 3 or 4 or something like that.
Yeah, it's not.
But I mean, that's half. That's less than half of what they've got now, right? So I kind of moved after that, like this. All right, so you've got this politics by influencer, and you've got this transfer portal. That's what gets you elected. And that's really fast moving to me because it's all based on politics really keeps up with social media in that sense, right? It's really influenced by it and moves with it. But actual governing doesn't, right? So the institutions and the Constitution and the way bureaucracies work and Congress, that's really sporadic, right? It doesn't change that
It's
fast.
the antithesis.
Right. I think there's a lot we can do. Like I said, bring the tech bros in on both sides, bros and gals, right? Not just old guys.
Bros and gals.
But it's cooler to say tech bros. So I'm just going to use that as a name for all of them. And they do need to come in and change government, but that's a much harder long-term project, right? And I think what we saw last week, so the continuing resolution was negotiated over several weeks between the House and the Senate, the Democrats and the Republicans. And I think Elon came out first and started tweeting against and saying there's all this pork. There's 1,500 pages.
Shove some full-blown lies in there, right?
I don't even know what he said. I didn't read it. But like within 24 hours, and then Trump, I don't know, woke up from a nap and he saw it and started tweeting about it too. And that killed it. So I think what's interesting is what people didn't really understand. I think people didn't understand. It happened so quick. Is first of all, Elon just started tweeting. That didn't kill the bill. It wasn't until Trump that it killed the bill, right? So Elon can't do that on his own. He needs Trump. But by the way, what people are doing is everybody who has interest in those bills, they're geofencing Musk and Trump. They know where they are, and they're flooding wherever they are, like X, whatever social networks, with ads to show it, inserting stuff to show how much pork there was in the bill. So anyone who wanted to kill it was running ad campaigns based on where Musk was, right? I mean, that's what's going on in DC right now. So it's like, hey, you don't like something, make it look bad to Musk and like show it where if he's in Mar-a-Lago, geofence that area and flood the zone with a bunch of content about that. And it works, right? So people are going to do it. Yeah. So that's DC for you. But I have friends whose interest groups did do that, so I can confirm that it's in fact something that's happening.
Fact.
Yeah. So basically, Musk kind of gets the blame. People want to blame him versus Trump, but they blew this thing up, right? And it fails. And then they come in and they say, okay, now I want to increase. Trump says, I want to increase the debt ceiling. And that because the problem with the debt ceiling is his own party doesn't want to increase it.
Right.
Without major cuts. So they slap something together, throw it on the floor, and it loses badly. And 38 Republicans, the most conservative Republicans, voted against it. So this is a direct proposal from the incoming president of your party, and it gets flat out rejected, and 38 House members vote against it of your party. This is a freaking disaster.
Yeah, it's not a good
not a good look. I mean, Musk completely misplayed his hand. And then they go and threaten to primary Chip Roy and all these hard right guys. Like they were like, go ahead, So your little bluff isn't going to work on them. And then you can use that threat once, right? But now that you've used it and you said you're going to primary them, the fifth time you say you're going to primary them, they don't care. You're already going to do it. So like, they'll just do whatever they want now. So now you've got 38 members that are like, okay, we're going to get primaries. So we're going to do whatever we want. And I think they really push this without thinking through it. First of all, and you look out to like the Doge stuff and everything that they've got to get done with a 3-seat majority in the Senate and a 4-seat majority in the House or whatever it's going to be, 3 or 4. And you're threatening people. Like, I don't think that's going to work, buddy. They're not going to come through for you on these big votes. And you've got a very narrow majority. And then you're going to threaten like the liberal member, the more like blue state Republicans with primaries. And they're going to be like, okay, but you're going to put a more conservative person in and they're going to lose to the Democrat. So what are you doing? Like, what are these people thinking? Like I just don't think Elon.
I don't think there is thinking.
Yeah, I think he just doesn't understand politics. And so he better learn real quick because Trump was walking in with all this momentum, right? He had gotten the trifecta. He has business leaders and foreign leaders coming and genuflecting to him at Mar-a-Lago. And they go pick this fight. I mean, first of all, some of the nominations were idiotic, but whatever. Like, that seemed to kind of be like, oh, it's Trump, whatever. But then they picked this fight. They threw the Speaker of the House under the bus and weakened him even further.
Right.
And they got 38 members on the record against the president's proposal. I mean, what was this for? And then they go past something, without a few of the other like kind of inconsequential stuff that didn't cost any money. That got pushed out of the bill.
I think went on behind the scenes. Do you think like Musk and Trump are actually, when they're having tea down at Mar-a-Lago, do you think they're talking about this?
No, I think literally Elon got ads about how bad it was and just started tweeting. He didn't think about it. And then Trump's like, oh, he's out, so I better jump on top of it. And they didn't think through it, right? This doesn't bode well. And then certainly if I'm a Democrat, I don't believe any deal that, I get from the Senate and the House Republicans. Like Trump has to be at the table. And maybe Musk has to be at the table, right? And I'm not going to believe it until I hear Elon's not going to.
So doesn't that bother? Yeah. Like this is where we are. Like, I mean, it's
look, I mean, if Trump wants an advisor to have influence, he's not the first advisor that had a ton of influence. So whatever, that's fine. That's up to him. But I think it's high risk for him having this guy, gone off half cocked and like destroying your strategy. And Trump clearly didn't have one. So like, to me, what they should have done is I agree. Trump needs to get the debt ceiling out of the way because it divides his own party. Right. So what he should have done is carefully negotiated, helped Johnson negotiate something where they gave an omnibus bill. So not just a continuing resolution, but pass all the big bills, appropriations bills together, pass them for the entire year and include a debt ceiling increase in it. I don't know, like it's not clear to me whether the Democrats would have taken that, but they control the Senate right now. So the Senate wrote one half of the appropriations bills. So obviously there's probably stuff in there that they really want. And so maybe this is their last chance for a couple of years to write anything. So like maybe they would have taken the debt ceiling increase to get that. I don't know, maybe it was worth a try, right? So get all that stuff off your plate. And then you're going in to do tax cuts and immigration reform, all the stuff that you ran on that all you guys love, right? Instead, now you're going to be fighting over spending in March because the CR expires. You're going to be fighting over the debt ceiling that divides your party. Like what was the plan here? Like Trump could have used his influence behind the scenes to clear the decks and they didn't do that. And then they just made it worse. So I think it was a real, like everyone who thought Trump was coming in with this plan and it's going to be the same, like government's going to change every week and stuff's just going to pop up and it's not going to be handled well.
And so it gets a big, a lot of members of Congress, Republican members of Congress are saying, this guy, Musk's not even elected and he's influencing. Right. It's kind of crazy, but I think that's not, it's like, well, people have been influencing,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's up to Trump, right? I think that, look, Elon's a big donor. I think, One, is Trump scared of him? That could be something. He's the world's richest man. And so maybe Trump's like, that's the kind of profile. He's got his own media network. Like, that's the kind of profile that kind of strikes fear into Trump's heart, right? So maybe that's going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Elon can make a lot of trouble. But I think, look, he's going to become such a lightning rod. I mean, people are calling him President Musk and Vice President Trump. And Trump had to say something.
With Trump, right?
Yeah. Trump had to say something at an event yesterday saying that Elon isn't the president and he's not going to be in control. Like, I think there's only so much of that Trump's going to be able to take. And, obviously Elon's becoming the target, and he's going to the Democrats are going to hang everything bad off of him like a Christmas tree. Right. And he's a gift that keeps on giving. Because like I said, one of the provisions that fell out of this bill was increased restrictions on U.S. companies investing in China. Guess what U.S. company is investing in China? Tesla. Right. So that is clearly a conflict of interest. And like, I'm not saying that Musk did it for that. I'm sure in some ways he was doing it just because he thought it was a bad bill, right? So I don't want to engage in, questioning people's motivations, but without knowledge, right? But it certainly isn't a good look, right? And it was clearly pointed out by the Democratic appropriators who were a part of the negotiation. So this is what's going to come, right? Is they're going to attack him with everything, right? It's all about his conflicts of interest, and they're going to hang every bad thing off of Elon Musk like he's the Christmas tree. So
yeah, I mean, I like kids who use the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, it is a target in that sense. I mean, conflicts of interest. And
exactly.
The term hasn't even started yet.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
so to me, he
hasn't even taken office yet.
Right. So to me, this was sort of like a show that, like, yes, you can get the politics and the media right, but you can't. But it's harder to get the governing right. So this was, they were playing the election playbook back when it was all theoretical, and they could just spout off stuff and didn't really matter because no one was going to do anything about it. Now it's getting real, and it just blew up in their face, right? So I think that's the media, the quick changing media hitting the slow changing government, right?
Yeah.
And then, to be bipartisan here, I saw the same thing happen with the Democratic Party in the House. Now, a little different in that this isn't a presidential candidate doing this, and the Congress tends to be its own creature, right? So the Democrats are very seniority based in the House, and you get your committee chair because you've been on the committee the longest, right? Republicans actually tend to not do this quite as much, which is better, I think.
No,
but
anymore they don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So the House Oversight Committee, the ranking member, so it would be the chief Democrat on the committee, that spot came up, and whoever it was, I can't even remember who was there before, left. So, it's like, who's going to be chair? And AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, decided to run for the chair, leapfrogging another guy, Jerry Connolly, who's a rep from, I think, Arlington, Virginia here. And Jerry Connolly looks like your drunk Irish.
The older guy, the picture you had? Yeah, okay.
I mean, he's just like Elmer Fudd, it's like whatever. So the Democrats reject AOC and put this guy in power. And this is a committee that does all the investigations, right? So this committee is going to be, under the Republicans, are going to go after everything, the Democrats are doing. And who do you want defending you? Like, the most attractive, like, media savvy person the party has, AOC, or like your rumpled ninth grade math teacher, Jerry Connolly.
Yeah.
So like, they're not getting what's going on here. Like, it's changed. And then, like in 2 years, if they take back the House, that is the committee from which they rake the Trump administration over the coals, right? And all the TikTok moments from, blowing up some corrupt bargain that, somebody in the administration does at some point in the next 2 years, right? Yeah. So who do you want doing that? You want AOC. So what are they doing here? Like,
she would have been much better at that.
Much better. And much got, I don't know, it says to me like the party in Washington isn't going to change itself. It's going to have to be someone coming from outside who understands this stuff and blows them up, right? And, look, so someone will emerge in 28 who will take control of the party. And then hopefully that person's savvy enough to know that not to let this stuff kind of keep going. So I thought that was, both parties seem to be struggling with this governing versus media thing and how they change at different rates. but they're both trends we're going to see going forward. And I don't know, maybe if I were a Democratic strategist, I'd want to get rid of the seniority system and get my best people in the committee chairs, right? But who knows what they'll do.
Yeah.
And then I finished the piece just saying, like, overall, I'm really encouraged by U.S. politics.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
It's a bright note. You end on a bright note. So
yeah.
Why are you encouraged? Tell.
Well, I mean, it's crazy and it's messy, but like, it's vibrant, right? I mean, we're actually out there contesting, and Trump's bringing in a new approach. I mean, you can agree with it or disagree with it, but it's new, and he's really pushing it. He's pushed a lot of ideas to the fore, and it's a big confusing mess, but you know, that's what the country is. And we're a big confusing mess of 330 million people.
Yeah.
And
you're a mess.
Right. And he built a coalition that brought in former Democrats and all these, you know. So, and then you look at the exit polling, like he brought in a lot of Blacks, Hispanics, particularly Asians, into the Republican Party this time. So we were less polarized by race, and then even significant chunks of women moved to him, so less polarized by gender. And even some more educated people voted for him than last time, and that's education. Those are the three huge polarization: education, race, and gender, that we've been fighting about for the last 20 years or so. And like, we're less polarized in every one of those dimensions in this.
So this is what you mean when you say we're very divided. We're very divided, but less polarized.
Right. And I don't know what the divisions are. They kind of change all the time. So like I'm saying, like, it's a 50-50 electorate. And that's why getting an RFK can make the difference. Because he might have like 2% of the vote, 3% of the vote, but that's enough, right? So that's my coalition building. You got to do that. And that coalition building requires you to be flexible on your policy ideas, because you're going to have to bring in somebody like that. I mean, who knows who it is next time, right? It might not be RFK, but you're going to have to be flexible enough to bring these people into your coalition to win. And I think those people are up for grabs they're going to look for a deal every single time, because they don't really care. Like, they got a couple of pet issues, but they don't, you know, they're not really ideologically clear where they sit. And so I think they're up for grabs. They can move back and forth. And so while we will remain divided in the sense that they'll probably be close to 50-50 on both sides, I think significant chunks enough can move back and forth that it kind of prevents this like polarization where it's like, I believe I'm this identity, and I have these 5 beliefs, and I disagree 100% with everybody on the other side. That's polarized. Divided is like, I'm kind of on this team where, you know, each side is like, I hate Trump or I like Trump. But like, then there's these people who move back and forth in the middle. And so it allows for this policy flexibility. And like, you might see Democrats running on half of Trump's agenda in 28, right? And you might see a Republican emerge that has different, you know, I can't tell you what ideological mix you'll have on each side in the future election.
Yeah. It's
to some extent. I mean, there are some hardcores to the parties. Like, Democrats are going to raise taxes, Republicans are going to want to cut taxes. But look at entitlements and stuff. The same. What's the difference between the two parties? So I think that we're getting less ideologically polarized, except on a couple of issues. And, you know, there's a lot more in the middle than there was, I think, even last election. So I think that's a shift. And elections are going to be very close, because I don't think anyone's going to put together the right coalition. And that's something I can go into later. It's a bigger idea.
Next.
I don't see the prospect, you know, like, just in a shorthand, I think someone's got to raise taxes and reform the trade system to get rid of these imbalances. And it's a long, complicated argument, but each party won't do one part of it. And until you do that, you know, it's not going to happen. And I think there's a few issues where you're going to have to reshape the system. I think Trump's too unilateral, so like, he won't be able to reshape the whole system, because unless he takes some kind of world leadership position on it, which I don't see happening. So like, as I said 2 weeks ago, I think 45% of the world's production is China of manufacturing, right? We cannot reshore 45% of the world's manufacturing. We don't have the people and resources in the country to do it. So we have to lead sort of like a global coalition to do that. And I just don't see that being something Trump's interested in. So he will start changing the trade system, but he won't fully change it into what we need. And on the other hand, we need to raise taxes and bring tax revenue back up to its traditional percentage of GDP. We're now like at 16%. It needs to be at 17.5% of GDP collected in taxes. And he's not going to do that. So I think until somebody can combine those things together, along with not being woke, along with, a couple of other things, you're not going to see that realignment permanently. And so there's always going to be this problem. Like, I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion that Democrats are going to run on raising taxes next time, it seems like. Trump's going to cut all these taxes. We're going to have some kind of economic problem, or the deficit's going to become a huge problem with, interest rates going up. And Democrats are going to be like, oh, he did that to give, Apple more foreign tax cuts, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's probably going to be what they run on, but who knows, the world doesn't always play out the way I think it's going to.
Just the fact that you say the Democrats, a couple of years from now could be running on some of Trump's issues. It's like, it's a tipsy-topsy world.
Yes, it is. Yeah. No, I mean, they certainly will. I mean, Biden ran on some of Trump's policies too, right? We're doing industrial policy where he kept the tariffs on China in place. I think that there's a realignment politically in the sense that like both parties have become more populist. But I don't see yet someone who, so in a sense, like Trump is a Reagan-esque figure in the sense that he kind of broke through first. When it took someone that transgressive and that insurgent of a candidate, he just like blew up the Republican Party himself.
Yeah.
And it took someone like that to really push through to get, and in a sense, he's changed both parties. But I don't see a permanent realignment like Reagan did to the Republican Party. In a certain sense, like Trump's hardly a partisan figure, right? He is a former Democrat. He's pro-union. He's got a lot of mixed up beliefs, right? So who knows what he is really? And so he changed both parties in a populist direction, but he did not cement like a Republican majority for a generation. That hasn't happened. So I think you're going to see Democrats take over and then Republicans take over until either these issues get resolved around our trade balance and the new, we have to build a new economic and security system across the world. That's clear. And I don't think Trump's going to do it. And the Democrats haven't figured out what to do yet either. So we'll see. But until someone figures all that out, we won't see a realignment to a party.
Yeah, that's a tall order.
Yeah. And I think just previewing
economic order, and then we'll figure it.
Just previewing next week, I think that the optimism I have is that at least we're dealing with the issues. Like I said, I don't think Trump or Democrats have the right answers, but they have some of them. And at least we're like engaged in it and we're working on it. And I see that as a sharp contrast to what's happening in Europe. I'm really depressed about European politics.
So we're going to do some Europe bashing next?
We're going to do some Europe bashing next because I think their politics are particularly sclerotic and the effort to really try to keep the far right out of power and not co-opt the far right is going to lead to, I think, some pretty bad results going forward. So, but I'm still formulating all my thoughts on that. So
the wheels are turning. The wheels are still turning on that one.
Yeah, but if you look at like Macron and even Merz, and he's going to win in Germany, I mean, these are not people who are getting what's going on, So European politics isn't flexible enough to take in someone like Trump. And that's its downfall, I think. Obviously, they have a different history. Letting people like him into power didn't work out so well in Germany in 1933. So.
Right, of course.
But I do think that maybe Europe overlearned that lesson a bit. And they're, I don't think you need to let somebody rule by decree today and stuff like that Hitler had. So, we can maybe a far right candidate can win without destroying the democracy at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if Europe's ready for that.
Well, the other thing I think that I don't really understand about their policies is part of what I'm thinking through now is like, why can't a center right party like the CDU in Germany, why can't they co-opt most of the Alternative for Germany? That's the far right party, the AfD, trying to keep out of power. Why can't they co-opt most of their ideas and policies, right? That's what you do. You go and you're like, oh, these crazy, this is what Boris Johnson did and why he failed in the end. Is, Dominic Cummings, his advisor, really architected it. But there was this UKIP party, the UK Independence Party, that was all for Brexit. And basically, Boris Johnson broke through the Tories and said, we're going to be for Brexit. And the reason for UKIP existing went away, and they took over the party and they won this huge majority. And then, of course, Boris Johnson promptly goes and starts acting like a traditional Tory again. He forgets that he did that. And then now you've got reform. Nigel Farage came back and formed his old party under a new banner, and they got destroyed. The Tories got destroyed in the election because they did like a temporary co-opt of this part of the party, but didn't follow the precepts of it. Right. And so that's what
you're getting. So you're thinking live about this right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to write about just how like Europe has failed to do what Trump did and incorporate this new populism into the mainstream parties and make it part of the governing agenda. And that's what's going to break Europe free. But I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon.
I have a couple of thoughts about that, but we'll save it for the.
All right. My fear is that if it breaks through, then it breaks through in this sort of violent, if you deny these people power for decade after decade, and then they finally break, then it's all the worse, right? So, but we'll be writing about for next week again, I guess, in the new year.
All right. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The New Rules with Alan Pentz. For more insights on mastering the new game, follow @apentz, that's APENTZ, on X, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, in today's world, you don't follow the rules, you write them.